So here you are, on one hand, is trying to aspire to really do something. On the other hand, you're not allowed to be pretentious. And finally you say, F it. I don't care if I'm pretentious or not pretentious, or if I've done it or I haven't done it. All I know is that I am going to see this movie.
There are few filmmakers more revered than Francis Ford Coppola. And yet Coppola is unique in that his style can be difficult to define. Why do Coppola's movies all vary so greatly in aesthetic, mood, and content? And in the face of this, what makes a Coppola movie a Coppola movie? This is the directing style of Francis Ford Coppola. First, let us make an offer you can't refuse. Subscribe to Studio Binder and click the bell to stay in the know on all our filmmaking videos. Time for our journey up the river. Francis Ford Coppola is one of the fathers of New Hollywood, the movement of young filmmakers who took hold of the American film industry in the 1970s. He credits the groundbreaking nature of many of his movies to his willingness to take risks. Coppola explains, "In the early days of the movies, they didn't know how to make movies. The cinema language happened by experimentation, by people not knowing what to do. An essential element of any art is risk. If you don't take a risk, then how are you going to make something really beautiful that hasn't been seen before? I was never afraid of risks. The only risk is to waste your life, so that when you die, you say, 'I wish I had done this.'" Coppola's penchant for experimentation has resulted in enormous success, as well as devastating failure. To understand Coppola as a filmmaker, one has to examine both sides of the coin, the highs and lows of his career.
But will it be commercially successful?
Well, I mean, how do I know?
As a young filmmaker, Coppola already showcased his thirst for experimentation. He stretched an ultra-low budget as far as he could under the tutelage of Roger Corman with the thriller Dementia 13, and then learned how to manage a studio budget with the musical Finian's Rainbow. He then tried something totally different with The Rain People, playing with editing techniques he borrowed from the French New Wave. But of course it was his risk-taking in his next movie which changed the face of American cinema.
You don't even think to call me Godfather.
Francis Ford Coppola didn't want to make The Godfather. His production company, American Zoetrope, found itself in financial trouble the first of many times after funding George Lucas's THX 1138. So at first, The Godfather was little more than a paycheck. But as Coppola slowly got more invested in the project, he developed an idiosyncratic take on the material. Coppola and cinematographer Gordon Willis did nothing short of redefine the look of mainstream film. Willis deliberately underexposed large swaths of the movie, resulting in visuals that were far darker than nearly anything that had come before it. The risk wasn't seen fondly by the studio executives.
I got a lot of criticism because they said, well, you can't see Brando's eyes. There were times in some of his scenes where I deliberately did not want to see his eyes, so that you saw this mysterious human being thinking about something.
They were horrified with everything. They thought it was much too dark.
But the distinct visuals served a narrative purpose, aesthetically submerging an audience into a dark underbelly. Cinematographer John Bailey explains, Gordon Willis didn't use the traditional key lights, hair light, fill light. The top light box that Gordy created, soft, single-source top light, was often called coffin box lighting by older cinematographers at the time, because it made the faces look very skeletal. No fill light in the eyes, single source, very unflattering in a lot of ways. The old guard cameramen had total disdain for it. But the pioneering visual approach was a massive success. influencing generations of directors and cinematographers to come. As cinematographer Denson Baker puts it, every cinematographer who came after Willis can reference him as an example of bucking the trend, putting an actor in the shadows, being bolder, playing it less safe. After having pushed the boundaries of visual style with The Godfather, Coppola used his next movie to push the boundaries of sound. With The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola used his newfound creative freedom to create a paranoid thriller like no other. To do this, Coppola and his crew built a subjective soundscape that expanded the world beyond what we're seeing on screen. Coppola elaborates. We felt that any man who sits for 9 hours at a time listening to things would be very conscious of sounds and relate to sound in a different way than a normal person. That's why we tried to have the track more from his point of view. Coppola was fascinated with the new technologies in sound recording that allowed audio to be captured from far away. He wanted his film to utilize this approach.
I could even shoot it the way the story implied, which is to say, have the two actors walk through the crowd and talk and actually try to use our long lenses and our powerful microphones to try to pick up the conversation.
Coppola and his team heavily relied on radio mics, hiding crew members in shots.
He'd kill us if he got the chance.
The innovative sound recording techniques were then augmented by innovative sound design in post-production to create The Conversation's unique oral environment. Coppola brought in pioneering editor and sound designer Walter Murch. Murch experimented with a mix of the film to try to make it as dynamic as possible. Coppola explains Murch's process. To keep the extremes from the highest sound to the lowest sound, he had the highest sound right at the peak of the optical track, so that the lowest sound would be quite a bit different from that, which means that the whole soundtrack is mixed unusually low, and when it is projected, the older theaters have to play it high. For his next big risk, Coppola returned to the story that made him a household name. For any other director, making a sequel to their most beloved work could be seen as the safe bet. But with The Godfather Part 2, Coppola knew he wanted to take a new kind of risk.
After The Godfather, I knew how to make that type of Italian-American gangster film, but I didn't want to do it again. Because if you make films you don't know how to make, you learn a lot. So I was more curious on going on into different forms.
This meant venturing into new territory in his screenwriting. Coppola's favorite approach when writing is improvisatory, as he explained.
To write a movie, it's probably not unlike an actor doing an improvisation. Sometimes I'll stop and I'll do a little step outline, but I'll only do 6 or 7 steps. I won't do all the steps, and then I'll just use that as a guide.
But with The Godfather Part 2, Coppola opted to experiment much more with the narrative structure, writing a generational epic which straddled 2 timelines.
The Godfather Part 2 had taken upon itself a very ambitious structure, which was that it was going to tell its story in 2 entirely different time periods, basically going back and forth in a kind of parallel structure between them. I wanted to write a screenplay about a man and his son, but both at the same age.
These 2 parallel timelines not only was a screenwriting risk, but also a production one, since it required far more locations and costs to create 2 different time periods.
Lake Tahoe setting on their estate, LA, Las Vegas, New York, Sicily, Cuba, a tremendous amount of ambitious filmmaking.
Once more, Coppola's big gamble paid off, as The Godfather Part 2 is widely considered to be one of the greatest sequels ever. Coppola used the goodwill he earned from the Godfather movies to push the envelope further than he ever had before. With Apocalypse Now, Coppola sought to make the definitive Vietnam War film. And though the process of making the movie was infamously difficult and expensive, many would say he succeeded. A large part of the film's success comes from its boundary-breaking post-production. 3 editors were credited on the film: Lisa Fruchtman, Gerald B. Greenberg, and Walter Murch. As such, the film had various drastically different cuts as Coppola and his editing team tried to reshape the narrative that had shifted even throughout production. Despite the tremendous financial pressure Coppola was under, he prioritized experimentation. Walter Murch recalls, always, when presented with the opinion of A and B, if B was riskier yet offered the potential for something really unique, he would go for that. It was breathtaking at times. One of the most avant-garde scenes is the film's opening. Murch describes how it came to be.
That scene is arguably one of the crazier scenes in the whole movie, and yet I, who was dubbed the most sane person, was assigned to cut this. Today, it would be very easy to see what the dissolves looked like. In those days, there was no way to do that. I had to modify the editing machine I had to have 3 screens and then build rolls of each element that I wanted to superimpose and run those so that they were run in sync and imagine what those dissolves might look like.
Even after what Murch dubbed the longest post-production of any film I have ever been involved in, Coppola still didn't view Apocalypse Now as complete. Decades later, he returned to the film and re-edited it twice, with the Redux version, and then what he called the final cut. According to Coppola, these edits were made to push the avant-garde elements of the film even further. He explains, what is considered avant-garde in one moment, 20 years later is used for wallpaper and becomes part of the culture. It seems that's what had happened with Apocalypse.
Don't look at the camera. Don't look at the camera. Just go by like you're fighting. Like you're fighting. Don't look at the camera. It's for television. Just go through. Go through. Just go by. Keep on going. Don't look. Go on. Keep going. Don't look at the camera.
Coppola has continued to experiment with this unique type of ever-evolving editing. In 2011, the director released Twixt, a film that utilized live editing, meaning that Coppola would cut the movie differently for different audiences, turning editing into a live performance. But post-production isn't the only stage of filmmaking Coppola has tried to revolutionize. With One from the Heart, his follow-up to Apocalypse Now, Coppola wanted nothing less than to change how movies were created. After his tortured experience with Apocalypse Now, Coppola was interested in creating a movie completely inside a studio. He explains,
my feeling is that my own work, certainly, and and some of the work of other people that I know, is moving more into the area where you can really control the elements of the drama.
Coppola describes, I was very interested in the idea of live cinema. What if you rehearsed the piece and you built all the sets so that they followed the continuity of the story, and the actors would perform the entire film? It was to combine a lot of elements of theater and television and cinema, but coupled with live performance. This ambition required a massive effort. Production designer Dean Tavoularis was tasked with creating elaborate sets that stretched into one another, while technicians rigged the studio to be able to show live feeds from multiple cameras, as was done for television. But due to technical and financial restraints, Coppola was unable to shoot the film entirely as a continuous show. And the film's struggles at the box office made sure that Coppola's dreams for remaking the industry would not come to fruition. One from the Heart was arguably the first time Coppola's penchant for risks backfired. But the film was not without its influence. it helped introduce the concept of modern pre-visualization, which continues to be popular today. The commercial failure of One from the Heart put Coppola in a tremendous amount of debt. Between needing to recoup his losses and the end of New Hollywood, for much of the 80s, Coppola had much less creative freedom. After the relative success of The Godfather Part 3, however, Coppola was back in good standing, and it was time for his next big swing. Bram Stoker's Dracula is unlike anything else in Coppola's filmography. A gothic horror with fantastical set pieces and over-the-top melodrama.
I have crossed oceans of time to find you.
But perhaps Coppola's boldest experimentation can be found in the film's visual effects.
It was 1897. That was the birth of the cinema. So I asked, what was the cinema like? And I learned that in those days, the cinema was the plaything of magicians, and that movies were considered part of a magic show. And the early filmmakers, like the famous Méliès, the French, used to do magic tricks.
But Coppola's vision quickly ran into resistance when he talked with various visual effects experts, who all insisted that he would need to use digital technology. Coppola argues that they were, as they always do, leading me down the path to do it the way everybody does it. So instead of listening to the naysayers, Coppola brought on his son, Roman, to oversee the visual effects. Coppola explains, "In the script, there were 1 million effects, but I wanted to do them all live. Nothing in post-production, do them all in the camera. I couldn't get anyone to take me seriously. So I hired my young son, Roman, who was an enthusiast about magic." Coppola and his son used techniques like double exposure, where they would film one element and then film another element over it. Some of the effects were as simple as reversing the footage, or just doing it for real. The result are stunning effects, which, unlike many early digital effects, largely stand the test of time.
All right!
In the 21st century, Coppola has largely kept a lower profile, working on smaller passion projects that further experiment with digital editing, such as Twixt and Tetro, and pushing the limits of lower-budget filmmaking with youth without youth.
Time, stop!
With Megalopolis, however, Coppola's epic ambitions have returned. He once more has set out to make his own path, financing the $120 million movie on his own so that he could maintain complete creative control. Coppola's career is a testament to creative innovation. He is a director who is uncomfortable in his comfort zone, consistently pushing himself beyond what he already knows how to do, no matter the level of risk. If there's one thing we can learn from Francis Ford Coppola, it's that you never know what you're capable of until you give it a try. Start making your filmmaking ambitions a reality with Studio Binder's screenwriting and storyboard software. Until next time, don't be afraid to take a chance.